Hello developers. So today we are going to know about promises in JS, and let me tell you very frankly that freshers always be very much confused about this topic. They always hover upon or hop to upon video to video or articles. So it's a crucial topic for a fresher, the newbie learning JS. And let me tell you that some people say that means some coders believe that promises is not necessary in today's web development journey. That's wrong, because if you are, yes, we have got async await as a better version of doing asynchronous programming, and yes, it is true that it is lot more clean code, etc and all. But at the same time, due to due async await is not much introduced before 2015 or 2016. So there are codes, there are JavaScript codes, inner modules that we have to deal with promises only. Okay, so promises is necessary in today's web development journey. Yes, in today's JavaScript. True. First thing. Second thing. After this video you are not going to be confused with promises. I guarantee that if you are going to be with the video. Second thing. Third thing, this will take some time and will be little bit of overwhelming. And yes, if whatever I have said before, right now, so if those looked you overwhelming, just be with the video and things will be much more clearer with the video going on. Okay, so let's start. So first, as our ritual says, we will make a folder with name promises, what's the topic is, and then inside that file, which I will give it a name script.js. Okay, but before going around this script.js and everything, let's get to the some articles. Okay, and don't worry if something or the other will be felt like overwhelming from means if I think that it's kind of more than the average line, I am going to explain it in my words. Okay, in the easy words. So let's talk about what's promise, and this MDN docs gives all you need. Okay, so let's see. The promise object represents the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation. I will tell you about what is asynchronous afterwards. So the promise object represents the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation and its resulting value. Okay. Description. A promise is a proxy for a value not necessarily known when the promise is created. It allows you to associate handlers with an asynchronous actions, eventual success value or failure reason. Okay. Now, a promise is in one of the these states. Okay. So promise has eventual has three states. What? Pending, fulfilled, rejected. Okay. So before moving any much forward, let's talk about what is asynchronous programming and what is promises in easy words. Okay, so first let's talk about asynchronous programming. So in real life world, okay, why JavaScript is used? JavaScript is used for the front end part originally. Okay, what I am saying means what industries generally prefer. Okay, with what? With something kind of framework or library like Vue or React. Okay, cool. Now that's a front end part. There will be a back end part too. Okay, the suppose you have a this is a front end part, and here it's a back end part. So this is a back end part. Okay, FE, and here we will write BE. Okay, now this front end will consist of UI UX. That's it. This will consist of UI UX. What is UI UX? The front end part with what we actually see. This, the window. This is the website exceldraw.com. Okay, and this is the window. Okay, so this is the UI part. What we are seeing. So this is actually the front end part. Now, if you will see whatever I have taught or in the previous tutorials, you can see lots of data here, right? Already been drawn or teached, right? These things. Cool. So how this actually data came by? This came by from the backend part. Okay. Xcali actually asked for the authorization. What is authorization? Authorization is the means, am I the user of Xcali and am I already been logged in or not in this web application? Okay, so it will check something like that. How these things are happening? Whenever the application loads itself, okay, it give a API call in backend, okay, and checks if the front end user asking for the UI UX is already been a user of the SQL draw or not, logged in user. Okay, if yes, from backend the confirmation will come, it is true or not. If yes, then I will simply be logged in from front end side. Okay, BE will send the data yes or no. They will have some protocols, etc, etc. Just get the rough idea. Okay, the higher part idea. So BE will check the answer is yes or no. If yes, then it will log me to the skeledraw.com, and if no, then it will ask me to log in. Okay. Now, whenever BE will send the data from to front end, it will also send this data. Okay, that I have drawing from so many days. Okay, either that or front end will either that is going to happen, or it can also be like that front end got that yes from the BE, that is backend, and then front end will again do an API call to backend to ask the data for the current logged in user, that is me. Okay, something will that happen. Now think like this is the front end part, and the backend is deployed somewhere else. So front end is deployed in a server, backend is deployed in another server. For this calling of the API to backend and getting data back to the front end, there will be some sort of time needed, right? And the code asking, think like this, the chunk of code where the code is written for the API call to the backend, for the endpoint to the backend, that code will be somehow to wait. It will have to wait, okay, for the result come from the backend. Okay, for the result come from the backend, that is the data, yes or no. What is the data of the logged in user, whatever it is. Okay, so if supposedly if we don't have any mechanism to stop that chunk of code, for at least 2 seconds or 3 seconds, and the code will run below to the lower codes and execute further without waiting of this data part from the backend. Okay, will I get my data to the UI, no. Okay, I will not get that data in the UI, and hence that waiting part of the code is actually why we call asynchronous programming. Okay, so now let's see more about asynchronous programming. I i know that this is promise lecture, but I thought that asynchronous is also very much needed for you. So here I am just covering both of them. Okay, so the caption will be something like that only, title of the video, Asynchronous programming allows a program to start a potentially long-running task and continue processing other events while that task is running rather than waiting for it to complete. Okay. Now, what happens is, if, listen to me very carefully, if my front end will not get the data and will go to the other codes, okay, will go to the other codes, there are chances that the data will not be stored to the UI UX or not be fetched properly. Okay, so what this asynchronous programming mechanism do is, it will tell that lines of code to run in background. It will run in background, okay, and the interpreter will run the further codes, what in whatever the timing is needed. So suppose here are some asynchronous codes. Suppose this is a code, okay, 3 lines. This is in asynchronous code, and here are again 3 to 4 lines of codes. 1 2 3 4, okay, again there are 3 to 4 lines of code. Now this asynchronous code will actually run in background, okay, this will run in background, and the interpreter will move further to run this part of code. Okay, this is called asynchronous programming. Means the codes are not synchronized. The interpreter will not execute this first forcefully and then move to further processes. No, the interpreter will take this or command your server to run this asynchronously in background part, and then run further codes. Okay, this is what is asynchronous programming actually called. Actually, the concept is. Now coming to the promises part. Why promises and how promises work, right? So promises is actually been created. uh, uh, let's not talk it like this. Let's take you the very layman language. What's a promise is? A promise is generally meant for either either resolve or reject. What does it means? Okay, so you have given a promise to your friend. If your friend, okay, you have given a promise to your friend, and that friend is asking for a certain task to fulfill that promise. Now it's up to you that if I want to resolve, means I want to stand upon my commits, okay, stand upon my commits, that I want to resolve it, then you will resolve your promise, means you will fulfill your promise, or you are going to reject it. This is the basic layman language of promise. What's a promise is. Now this promise has actually been made in JavaScript to support asynchronous programming, okay, to support asynchronous programming, okay, to support asynchronous program. And now it's time to move again back to the article. But before that, let me write one more thing. These promises have 3 states, okay, and let me explain you all of them. First is first is pending, okay. Second is fulfill, fulfilled, that is also called resolved. Another is rejected. Okay, okay. What's a pending? This is the initial state. So promises is actually asynchronous programming. Means it will do things asynchronously in the background of your codes. Okay, so there are chances that why we need asynchronous programming, because it will eventually take 2 to 3 seconds, 5 seconds more than other codes, other chunks of code. Okay, so it might be fulfilling it or rejecting it, but after 2 to 3 seconds we can think of like that. So there should be initial state of that promise, and that is pending. Okay, that's a pending state. Means as soon as you call that promise, that promise state itself go to the pending state. Okay, and if the promise code, whatever written inside that promise code, gets your data works with the protocol whatever they ask for, then they will give you the fulfill message, or they will provide you the reject message or reject data, whatever they have. Okay, so this is the basic three states of promise. Now moving back to the article, let's find out something better. Okay, if I will get something like that, the eventual state of a pending promise can either be fulfilled with a value or rejected with a reason error. Okay, when either of these options occur, the associated handlers queued up by the promises then method are called. I will tell you about this later on. If the promise has already been fulfilled or rejected, when a corresponding handler is attached, the handler will be called. So there is no race condition between an synchronous operation completing and its handlers being attached. A promise is said to be settled if it is either fulfilled or rejected, but not pending. Okay, let me find something if I can show you. Okay, so let's move to the coding part, how we actually write promise and what happens. So let me first tell you, you will not write a promise itself, you will just call that promise somehow or the other. Okay, but first we are going to write a promise. So a promise is probably uh, like you can store into a variable or a function. Okay, so first we are going to make a function with name promise, and inside it I am going to make a return a promise. Okay, so return new promise. And while making up a promise, so we are right now making of a promise. Okay, you have to give two states. First is resolve, okay, another is reject. Okay, why two states? Because of course a promise can be resolved or rejected, right? Now for instance, right now let me do resolve. Okay, and what I'm going to do is your promise is resolved. So this is a simple syntax of a promise, where I have made a function with name promise and actually returned a promise which a custom promise which I made. Okay, inside that there are two handlers, resolve and reject. These are the two handlers. Okay, now right now the promise we created is just resolving things, it is not doing anything like reject. Okay, so just let call it, okay, promise, and let's see what's going to happen. Let's call this function promise. Okay, so current directory, let's change the directory to promise. Yes, promise. And now node script.js. Okay, so it is not doing anything because of course I have called but I have not consoled it. Let's see if what happens if I console it, right? Okay, so here is it's saying promise, your promise has been resolved. Okay, so what's happening is whenever I call this function, it actually returning me the promise. It's actually returning me the promise, but what I need is I need this. Okay, the result of the promise. I don't need the promise or its state, I need the result of the promise. See, whenever this promise will be resolved, it will be giving me the resolved state. And what is that? Whatever I have written inside it. So resolve, and then the its data. What's my data? Your promise is resolved. Okay, when I consoled it earlier and run the script.js, what it actually gave me is promise itself. Okay, and its value. Okay, because it has been resolved. But what I need is I want to handle it properly. So handling is like something like this. Okay, we have to chain it. After calling the function promise, what we have to do is we have to chain it with dot then. Okay, and inside that dot then we have to pass a callback handler, callback function, which is actually a handler. What's that? The result. Okay, you can pass a pass result or data, whatever it is. Okay, and inside this you can call this handler function. Okay, so whenever I will do console log and this data, okay, let's see what's going to happen with the console. See, in console it is saying that your promise is resolved. So what happened actually is my promise function has been called. It is returning with a promise we created, custom one, and it's actually been resolved at that moment of time while calling. Okay, because there actually here it is not like that something asynchronous is happening, that my laptop that my system had to wait. Okay, or we have to do anything in background. So while calling the function it is got resolved automatically. Okay, so this is the resolve message what I am passing. What dot then actually do is dot then handles, generally dot then handles the data after getting resolved. Okay, so if my promise gots if my promise gets rejected, then what's going to happen? Suppose my promise is getting rejected. Okay, and here I am going to write promise is rejected, and this will be reject. Okay, so what if my promise will get rejected? Will it again console this? Yeah, it will console. Why? Because we are passing the resolve first. Okay, and the promise gets getting resolved. Now let's console. See, it's throwing me an error. Why? Because we the promise is getting rejected, but here is no rejection handler. Dot then is actually when the promises got resolved, but we don't have the reject handler. So for that we have to give a catch, dot catch method, and with chaining with dot then only. So promises chained with dot then, and this catch will chained with dot then. Okay, so catch, and this will handle error. What it will do is it will again have a callback function which will just log the error, nothing else. And now let's see what's the game. See, your promise is rejected. It is showing that your promise is rejected. Cool. Now if okay, so I have thought about something, but that will be later on. Let's talk more around this thing. Okay, now I want to make things a little bit of asynchronous first. Second, I want things to be handling both rejection and resolving of the promise with certain data. How? Suppose I am asking for a name here. Okay, and what we are going to do is, if this is a string, this will be a string, then of course it's going to, okay, so if name dot length, okay, name dot length is equals to no, it's greater than equals to 1. Okay, why? Because of course a name should be at least greater than uh, 2. Okay, the string of the length should be greater than 2. Okay, name, sorry. So if it is greater than 2, it will get resolved. If no, then it will get rejected. Okay, now let's call this again. Okay, so we are not asking for the what string cannot read of undefined length. Oh, because yeah, we are not passing something, right? So let's pass here hello. So right now our name is hello. Your promise is resolved, right? Okay. Why this earlier thing had came? Because before we are not passing this hello thing, and as name was undefined, dot length will not be executed in undefined. It will be only executed in string things. Okay, so right now we passed hello, the string got here, then here, and dot length is executable method. Now suppose if I will give something like he, okay, and this not he, like only h, okay, and then again I am going to call this function. What it's going to happen is going to do is your promise is rejected. Okay, so now imagine this. In real world we use fetch, we use axios and everything. Okay, these things actually do same thing with promise. It gets the data. Okay, it has some prototype to check if the data is correct or not. If not, then it will simply reject and give you the rejected data whatever they got from the backend or the API call. If it's accepted from the backend and got the proper data while fetching, then it will give you the resolved part. Okay, this is the basic promise programming. Okay, this is the basic concept of promises in programming. But now it's time to go bit of further. Okay, okay, so suppose if I will not give, wait a minute, dot catch, yeah, uh, we can also do this in next line. Okay, because JavaScript will eventually know what we are doing. And if I will not give this dot catch, what will happen? Think like this. Right now dot then is just handling the resolve part of promise, and we are giving h, which is not of course greater than equals to 2, so promise will eventually gets rejected. But of course I'm not handling it, so it will throw some or the error, something like that, trigger uncaught exception. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is you can also give something like this, error, and console.log error. Okay, let's check that if inside dot then function, first we have given a handler to handle the resolve part of the promise, and then with a comma we again provided a callback function, that is arrow callback function in arrow syntax. Okay, and here we try to accept the error and console that error. So is it going to work? Is it going to handle error part also? Yeah, it handled. Now if you think that error, because we have written error so it is working, no, err. Okay, you should not think like this because you are a JavaScript developer. Okay, now let's see. Your promise is rejected. Again it's handling. So first thing, for the newbie, because of writing this parametric name, data and error, things are not happening. JavaScript is promises object prototype, okay, is made in such a way that with dot then only you can handle both x resolve and both and the rejecting state also. Okay, the thing is we only give by conventionally the resolving part to dot then, and the rejecting part to dot catch. Okay, there are certain reasons for that, because it looks first thing well. Okay, suppose because you have a dot catch also to handle the error part, then why to make clutter, and why to clutter the code in dot then only, right? First thing. Second thing, there is called chaining. We can also chain this then with other things also, like console. This is the chain example of thenables. Okay, or simply then. Okay, so what's happening is, first this promise will resolve or reject this dot, then will actually, if resolved, then whatever we are doing with the data, it will console the data. And then if this then will be resolved properly, the chain will goes to this then. Okay, the second then, and that then will again will do whatever it's needed. Okay, cool. Now let's run this script again. Your promise is rejected. This is the chain of example of then. Okay, now this promise is rejected, right? Let's remove it here, from here to here, and console log error. Let's do it again. Your promise is rejected. What happens? Before writing dot catch, handling the error part also in the dot then, first thing, the code was highly cluttered. So the error, so my eyes is actually will have to take that pain, my brain will have to take that pain to uh, know the differences, which is a handling resolving handler, resolve handler, and which is a reject handler. But now giving dot catch will, mm, uh, with that, I will not have to take that much of pain. Moreover, when you already handled the error part in the before then, in the then earlier, the error part was handled. Okay, the error part was handled, and at the same time the then chain then chain also worked. Okay, but now when I got the error while resolving the promise, okay, this dot chain will not trigger, rather the dot catch will trigger itself, will do whatever been asked in the error part. Okay, and will finish off the code program. So because of this, we tries to handle the error part in dot catch with by conventionally. And so this should be the hierarchy. First dot then again we needed, then again dot then again we needed, then again dot then chaining, and at last you should give dot catch error. Okay, remember that then also can handle the error part. The only difference is that at first you will have to give the resolve handler, and then with comma give the error handler, reject handler. Okay, nothing else. So this is the promise and its basic concepts. Okay, with the further video we will come with the more of a advanced syntaxes, more of a advanced logic, like promise. Let me tell you, or you can also research upon this promise.all, promise something like promise dot settled, something like this is also there, then promise dot race. Okay, and all of from all of this, these two are the important ones. Okay, so this is the basic program about promise. We will meet in next video. Until then, bye. And yeah, before closing this video, I have a good quote for you. In term with for promise, I promise a result. Okay, this is from W3 school. I promise a result. Producing code is code that can take some time. Consuming code is code that must wait for the result. A promise is an object that links producing code and a consuming code.